Last year, I spent 5 days in Utah shooting a backcountry film for outdoor research with the Provo brothers. This is a behind-the-scenes look and a little breakdown of what went into shooting that production. The idea for this project stemmed from an idea that Ian and Neil had, where they wanted to document some bike-to-board days, where they could use e-bikes to access zones that are farther into the mountains and get there easier. This was the initial email Ian and Neil sent to kind of get our brains headed down this path, and what was initially the groundwork to begin this project. For this project, I was shooting video and my brother was shooting stills. Day one was one of the more challenging days of the shoot from a camera perspective because there were wetter conditions and the visibility ceiling was quite low. So we opted to tour to a couloir where we'd be able to have walls on either side and give us some visibility, and that way we wouldn't lose them as they skied down it. Once we met up with the brothers, it was about an hour to 2 hour tour into the couloir, and we didn't get any shots on the way in because the visibility was just so poor and it was actually like raining on us. To kind of begin to piece the story together, we started by shooting the brothers transition from their touring mode to the boot packing mode. And so we ran through a series of both of them taking the skins off their skis, attaching them to their backpack, and then eventually actually climbing up the mountain. Once Ian and Neil transitioned, we shot them from the side and from the bottom hiking up this couloir. And eventually we traded positions with them and went on ahead so we could shoot top down to give that perspective of them climbing up towards us and really kind of earning it. One of the big products for this year for OR is gloves. And so while we were doing these kind of close quarter moves, we wanted to really showcase a glove placement, and Ian kind of actually came up with this shot. One of the cool things we did was we mounted a GoPro onto his pole looking right at the glove, and then we were able to pair that with a slow motion cut of a pole being planted right in front of the lens, and it's kind of a nice glove accent shot, and the logo hit quite nicely right here. Once they made it to the top, they transitioned again to be able to ski down, and similar to the bottom, we shot each brother individually and kind of ran through some of the details of them taking their poles apart, putting their backpacks together, putting the gear on, putting goggles on, all of that. And then once it came time to shoot the descent of the couloir, we knew we wouldn't have a lot of shots, and so I opted to shoot this more in slow-mo than I would like to really kind of like accentuate that time and give us freedom in post to be able to tell that story, depending on how it was going to come together. Our last shots of the day were these two pickup shots, kind of leaving the couloir, and they actually ended up becoming kind of staples throughout the piece and were super helpful. One of the challenges of editing the piece were all the different areas of terrain that we had, primarily with the trees. And so this was a nice zone to kind of carry some energy. And since I shot it in 24 frames per second, the motion blur worked out pretty nicely. All right, day two was filled mostly with touring and powder shots. Because of the storm cycle that hit, we knew that this would be a great day to kind of milk those pow turns and capitalize on that. We didn't have any bluebird conditions, and once again, we're kind of stuck to navigating with the trees so that we'd have visibility. But we found this nice untouched zone pretty early on in the skin track, and it's one of those zones where not a lot of people would hit it because the runs aren't very long, but it worked out perfect from a filming perspective because there were all these little alleyways where we could really milk each lane and hide the previous turns and kind of work our way along so that it looked like it was all endless pow. Once we moved out of this zone, we climbed a little higher and shot some of the touring scenes here. The trees were very frosty and looked really nice on camera. As you can see, the skies and the conditions weren't totally ideal, and so we decided to go down and get back into the trees. There's a little wind lip we found on the way down, and it looks a little muddy because the sky's so gray, and the ride out wasn't very clean, so it ended up not making the cut. As we moved lower, you can see the trees became more visible, and it was easier to get separation of the rider and the trees and the environment. These are where we got some really incredible pow turns, really kicking up the snow. And we kind of milked this section on the way down. Again, shot it in super slow-mo because we didn't know how the vibe of the piece was going to play out. And I wanted to give ourselves a little bit of a safety net going forward. Here you can see Ian kind of talking about those alleyways and lining up Neil for a shot. This is a good example of Neil coming down one of the alleyways into the opening and giving us a nice big turn. Day 3 was the best day of all because we got another refill with the storm cycle, and things turned out to be clear. We started the day pretty early, and I think we woke up around 3:30 or 4 for this. We wanted to get up to the zone and be able to be near the top for sunrise. As you can see, we were a little late to that, but conditions were still epic up top. For this zone, we decided to shoot from another peak that was nearby so we could get a cross perspective. I flew the drone to the top to shoot some of their transitioning period and get those views of them standing on the ledges. And when it came time to shoot them skiing, I set the camera up on my backpack to act as a tripod to get a still shot, and then was able to pilot the drone for the descent. This was a nice way to get 2 shots out of 1, and I try to do this as much as possible so that I have 2 angles to work with in post. Both lines skied super well, and we got some great shots from across the valley. After they were done, Travis and we got to ski our own lines down and regroup at the bottom. That's where we decided to go back up to a slightly different zone for a couple more laps since it was nice. In this new zone, Ian and Neil went up while Travis and I stayed down low to shoot from the bottom. And I did the same technique again of setting the camera up on a tripod or my backpack and being able to use the drone to get a moving shot. After this, they went back up for another round, and this time they boot packed all the way up there. Instead of flying the drone and putting the camera on the tripod, this time I put the drone in position and just left it idle while it was still recording, and then was able to use the camera to track them while they skied. The intent here was just to kind of give myself different shot opportunities and options in editing so that everything didn't look or feel quite the same. After we were done with these lines, we skied back down to the highway and then hiked back out to our car. Day 4 was the day we were able to pick up the bikes and really begin to use them. We picked them up from the headquarters and immediately drove into the mountains and began to get some of these shots. Since this was our first time using these bikes, it was a little bit of trial and error to figure out the best ways to carry the bike so it wouldn't damage or hurt the frames. And we shot each brother individually here to get a bunch of those detail shots. Once they had the skis attached, it was time to begin biking. The first couple of shots we did was we put the Komodo on a Movi and walked down the trail and got these kind of push-pull shots of them flying past us. And after that, we moved to the drone and got some of these shots kind of flying down the river, revealing them, some top-down angles, as well as sending them off into the woods and having them just carry down the trail like they normally would to just chase them with the drone and get those perspectives without any other people in it. After that, we went in a couple miles to where it gets prettier and began to play with some of the detail shots. I used a Canon R6 for some of these hard mounts, and one of the coolest shots was rigging the camera off the bike to show that perspective of biking with ski boots, as well as showing the other brother while he's riding as well. After that was out of the way, we decided to shoot them parking the bikes and transitioning to skiing. We shot both of them together and then did individual details on each. Wanted to get those clips of showing them clicking into the bindings, getting the gear ready, and then leaving the bikes. I think one of my favorite shots of the project is this one here, where you kind of push through the bike and reveal them leaving to go off and enter the mountains. All right, day 5 was our final day, and for this we went back to the same zone where we were shooting the bikes, and we went a little deeper this time and wanted to do a little more skiing to kind of match those aspen trees with the trees that we shot for the bike scene. We spent a lot of time touring and showcasing them kind of touring through the mountains, and again got high enough to where we could find the alleyways. Here you can see one of these alleyways of him skiing directly to camera, and we were able to shoot this alleyway and then move over and shoot the next one. This one of Ian is just a few feet over from that previous one of Neil, and he comes through and douses the camera here for a nice transition that we used at the beginning of the edit. In total, I think we did 4 or 5 laps up this, and each time just kind of milked different zones and kind of carried along on this ridge. One of my favorite things about touring with these guys is that they are absolute machines and always finding ways to have fun in the mountains. So they made this little smiley face and kind of was a perfect little character addition for the edit. After we shot several laps in the Aspen Grove area, we went a little higher to where it transitions more to evergreens, and we found this little cliff drop. Ian was the first one to do it, and we shot it a little more off to the left. And the goal here was to shoot the same cliff, but make it look a little different. So we moved over to the right when it was Neil's turn and kind of had him come through, and he doused the camera nicely as well. Lastly, as we moved our way down, you can see the evergreens in the background and the aspens in the foreground here. And this was just a fun little playful scene of both of them being able to charge together as they rip back down to the car. One of the biggest challenges when it came time to edit was figuring out how to cut the footage together because of the various trees and the different landscapes we had, especially the kind of high alpine mountain bluebird environment. I'm pretty happy with what came together because the vibe and the feel feels like it really matches the Provo brothers and kind of their energy that they have into the mountains. The gear we used for this shoot was a red Raptor, a red Komodo, the standard one, an R6, and a GoPro 12. And the drone we used was a Mavic 3 Pro. Let me know your thoughts on this kind of behind the scenes look and look into what went into this production. If it's helpful or interesting, I'd love to do more. And if you have any questions, let me know. I'm always happy to answer those in the comments or make another video. If you want to see the final film we made, I'll put a link to it down below. But have a good one.
When we first saw fat-tired e-bikes, we thought they could be great new tools for getting a little further into the mountains, especially because we want to be fully immersed in the experience when we're riding.
Pedaling and hiking allows us to slow down and gain a deeper appreciation for the landscape and natural beauty around us, which is sometimes lost when we try to go fast. When we combine our passions for cycling and skiing in the same pursuit, we're not only having a lot of fun, but we're taking things we've done for decades and seeing them in a whole new light.